Welcome to episode 15 of Concise Game Reviews. I'm your host, Relicar Delta. This episode features a preview, not a full review mind you, of the recently released action brawler Towerborne. At the time of writing this preview, the game was only available to download on Steam since it's considered to be in early access. That said, if you own an Xbox console or use the Xbox Store on PC, the early access version will be available on those digital storefronts in the near future. Keep in mind that Towerborne is being developed by Stoic, but published by Xbox Game Studios. Now, on with the preview. At its core, Towerborne is an action game similar to other titles in the brawler genre. If you want a logical comparison, you might look at something like Castle Crashers or Streets of Rage. The core gameplay loop is simple enough. You're constantly fighting everything on screen, and you can do it with up to 3 friends. I'm happy to say that even though the game is in early access, the on-screen action is probably the game's biggest strength at the moment. The controls are snappy and responsive, and the moveset is deep enough that the player has enough agency to get creative, if they want to. Like most brawler games, there are only a few absolutely required mechanics. Towerborne is no different. You can survive most encounters by falling back to the basics or mix it up if you want. I should also note that players can easily switch between 4 different combat styles. Each combat style is unique and plays quite differently than the others. Speaking of which, this is probably a good time to explain some of the game's other systems, one of which you might not be expecting. The biggest surprise for me was the realization that Towerborne is a loot-based game. Your character's power level is determined by the gear they're wearing, along with a plethora of other stats. It might sound like an odd choice for an action brawler, but it does add an interesting layer of complexity. As you might expect, the in-game systems do their best to push the player along the path to a proper gear score, or stop them if they aren't ready. This did cause some moments where I realized my gear score wasn't quite good enough and I needed to go replay earlier encounters. This system is generally expected in a loot-based game, but if you're expecting a more straightforward approach, this might not be to your liking. As for presentation, Towerborne uses a hand-drawn visual aesthetic that simply looks great on screen. The characters' backgrounds and animations are all highly detailed, but the emphasis is certainly on a stylistic cartoon-like presentation. While it does look great in motion, the visual presentation can become a bit of a mess when there are a lot of moving characters on screen. Unfortunately, losing your character in the noise is a bit of a problem right now, and I hope the developers plan to address this in the future. Given this is an early access launch, keep in mind that many aspects will likely change over time. For example, fonts and various menus are stripped down to the most basic of components. I expect the UI and perhaps even the gear system to change significantly by the time the launch version comes around. Regardless, I am very pleased with the foundation of Towerborne. I believe it is heading in the right direction, and I look forward to seeing what comes next. This is Relicar Delta, signing out.